RuneScape has stood the test of time for over 20 years now, holding the title of most popular free MMO in the world, a number of other Guinness World Records, and boasting nearly 300 million registered users. It's incredible to think that all this came from such humble beginnings. But all things come from somewhere, and of those 300 million accounts, someone has to have been the first. Today, we're going back to the 4th of January 2001, the day that Rab became the first ever player to step into the world of RuneScape. Hello everyone, my name is Will Misted and I started playing RuneScape back in 2004. I honestly don't remember too much from back then. It's not like I ever thought I'd still be playing it nearly 17 years later. I like to share the stories I find along the way though, which is something you'll find a lot in the videos on my channel, but of all these stories, this is the one that stretches the furthest back in time. It's 2001. RuneScape releases with the classic skills we all know and love, such as Pray Good, Evil Magic, and who could forget, Influence. Of the 18 skills released with RuneScape in January 2001, 6 of them are removed by the end of May, combined into other skills or turned into quest points for Influence's case. By the end of that year, RuneScape's skill list would match up closely with what we have today with no more removals or combinations, but there was still a couple of odd exceptions. Fletching and Herblaw, which you might know as Herblore, big change I know, that would be released in February of 2002. Well, released isn't the right word. You see, Herblaw was actually on the skill screen from the very first weeks of RuneScape, you just couldn't train it. And it stayed that way until a full year later. But you know what could be trained? Like every other skill. Despite abysmal XP rates and a lack of any good training methods, some players were dedicated enough to grind all the way to 99 before the end of the year. At 25 XP per log, Everdread cut their way to max level in woodcutting, bagging RuneScape's first ever 99. That's over 520,000 trees. I know they say you can do whatever you want in RuneScape, but I can't help but feel there had to be something more exciting to do back then. Either way, it was clear that the players loved their skills. So it was to everyone's delight that 3 months after the first 99, Andrew decided to make a high score list, letting the players with the most experience have their names up in the lights for the world to see, for all the trainable skills, but not all of the skills on the in-game list. Now, the internet of the early 2000s was vastly different to the internet we know today. It was a lot simpler in many ways, especially for the URLs. Because of that, you could type in runescape.com/highscore01 and bam, you would have the highscore page for the first skill, let's say attack. Change that 01 to 02 and you got the page for the second skill. Now, a Swedish player, Guggy, had been the one to figure this out. They'd been an alpha tester for the game, so it's no wonder that they thought to try something like that. But their big brain didn't stop there. Since there are only 14 trainable skills, what happens if I type in high score 15?
System breach. Firewall 1.
Guggy had found the hidden high score page for Herblaw, but as no training method had been released, no one had been able to train it, and so everyone had 0 XP in it. Shocking, I know. But what's important is how the high score dealt with multiple people with the same XP. You see, if the list couldn't be ordered by experience, it defaulted to the next best thing. Chronological order. Players would be listed in order of how old their accounts were, the oldest being at the top. And so, the first ever RuneScape player, the person at the top of the high scores, the one who came before us all was... Okay. Side note. First, you know it was Rab since I spoiled that in the start of the video, but secondly, this list isn't perfect. The high score didn't track every account, it only tracked active ones. So when Guggy found the list on the 30th of November 2001, we found out that the first registered user who was still playing in November 2001 was Rab. Maybe the real first ever user was Cowkiller69, who immediately quit after having their fill of killing cows. But we don't know anything about them if they even exist, whereas we know a lot of interesting stuff about Rab, so humor me here. It was Rab! Woo! It makes sense though that Rab was the first player since he had some history with the Gowers and had been invited to make an account. And it's fitting that he held the title since he was well known and loved in the community at the time. Rab would also go on to help shape RuneScape into the game it is today. It just all fits together so nicely, doesn't it? Okay, backstory time. Rab first met Andrew Gower on the website Games Domain, a domain which we can only assume had games on it. At the time, Andrew used the site both as a moderator and a game developer. The two chatted and became friendly associates, as you often did to internet strangers back in the day. After barely surviving the Y2K apocalypse, Andrew reached out to Rab with an invitation. Andrew had been working on his own game, one that would be run outside of Games Domain, and wanted Rab to help test it. Rab agreed, bringing along some other friends as alpha testers, and became the first person to be sucked into playing RuneScape. And I mean, who wouldn't? Just look at the graphics. Ooh, yeah. Chef's kiss. Cutting edge stuff, I tell you. Rab's dedication to RuneScape was vast, going as far as to learn Andrew's own coding language, RuneScript, to help out to make content for the game. In just 8 hours, Rab wrote the 4th quest for the game, Romeo and Juliet, which was so beloved by the players that, after Jagex removed it in 2010, they later went on to make a second version of the game using a backup from 2007 to bring it back. It's no wonder that OSRS is the more popular game. Rab's suggestions also hugely shaped some basic design points of the game. For example, stopping anvils being too close to banks and giving iron smelting a 50% success rate were both his ideas. Clearly someone didn't like smithing. He also went on to write Prince Ali Rescue and Doric's Quest and developed a rudimentary system for banknotes in the late 2000s, but his specific execution for the notes weren't used. After 11 months of hard, unpaid labor, RuneScape was ready to be made public. Andrew gave Rab the good news, and when the time came for registrations to open, Rab immediately went for it. A few clicks here, some keystrokes there, and his legacy was secured. He was, as far as we can tell, the first person to sign up for RuneScape. Overall, the release was a success. Andrew began advertising his game on Games Domain, where he attracted the attention of a popular clan called the Sabers, who were all from a game called Cyber Wars. They thought RuneScape sounded great and they all hopped on board. By the end of day 1, they contributed towards the 50 new signups to RuneScape. Day 2, that number was 120. By May 2001, there were already over 2,000 simultaneous players online and 600,000 registered accounts. So yeah, I'd say that RuneScape was a success. But as good as that was for the game, it meant a lot more work was needed from the staff. It's not too hard to make sure that 50 people are getting along and not causing any trouble, less so when you're into the thousands. Andrew's cool new game now had bots everywhere, plenty of bug abusers, and your typical gamers screaming obscenities about minorities and your mother. Andrew needed someone he could trust, and he needed them fast. Just when RuneScape needed him the most, Rab went from a regular player to a moderator. No, really, he literally had an account called Moderator, which could spawn items and ban people and all that. Our alpha tester turned first player was RuneScape's newest protector, bringing justice against all those causing trouble in the game. Although, since the game didn't actually have any sort of report or evidence system yet, any alleged cases of rule breaking were just word of mouth, he said she said sort of stuff. So if there was any doubt about it, the player would have to be brought to the room. Ah, you're here. Why don't you take a seat? Who are you? My name is Rab, first ever RuneScape player, part-time moderator, and full-time about to ask you some questions. Tell me, have you ever broken any rules? Abused any bugs? Said any naughty words? No, I'd never do anything like that. Oh, okay. You're free to go then. See you. Wait, really? It sure is handy that no one would ever lie on the internet. Rab ended up using a sealed room in Al-Qarid as a holding spot for suspected rule breakers. With no way to leave without being teleported back out by a moderator, they had to talk to Rab if they didn't want to get banned. Paul Gower loved the idea so much that he started doing it himself, up until they added the black hole to fulfill the same purpose, just in a less public space. Rab eventually resigned from his voluntarily moderator role in December of 2001, saying that the responsibility was far too much for a single person to handle. That did not mark the end of his RuneScape career, however. In fact, Rab ranked fairly decently on the high scores in the early days. By no means a top player, but managing to still be a well-known face in the community. Rab continued playing until early 2003, when he finally packed his bag and headed for greener pastures. When asked why he quit, he claimed that the grassy area between Barbarian Village and Draenor Manor had a shade of green that was too bright and invasive, which hurt my eyes. You know, just scratch that part about greener pastures. As with all RuneScape players, Rab never quit permanently. He checks in from time to time, seeing how the game has changed since the days he was involved with it. While most of his known contributions to the game has been removed or revamped over time, he doesn't seem fazed by it. When Romeo and Juliet was removed in 2010, Rab said the quest was made as a light-hearted joke to make people smile and didn't seem to mind. What a swell guy. Now, before we wrap up, let's have one last look at those Urbla high scores. You could argue that since Rab had prior connections with the Gowers and had helped test the game, he wasn't really the first player for RuneScape's release. The first three on the list are all alpha testers as well. Shark and Ignite were the Gowers' personal accounts. So with all of those out of the picture, the first real player with no affiliation with Jagex could be Mutant Mount. But again, we only know those who stayed active until November, so the real first player, we may never know. Also, I just want to quickly give a shout out to the players who had literally any name they wanted at their disposal and still took names like Jessica 111 or Superman 3434 before anyone even had Superman. And how could we ever forget Porn God? I'd like to make a video about him, if you know what I'm saying. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching this look into the earliest days of RuneScape's history. I'm excited for next week, where we'll take a look into a similar topic, the other player moderator in 2001, the one that was Rogue. Make sure to ring that bell and click that sub button, cause you don't want to miss it. My name is Will Miss It, and I'll see you all then. Goodbye.